Well, hello, Helen Lane, and
Oh, hi there.
welcome.
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm delighted that you're joining us today to talk about your experience at FIT and probably wherever you have been in library land.
Sure.
And I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself if you don't mind.
No problem. My name is Helen Lane, and I am the Instructional Design Librarian at the Fashion Institute of Technology here in New York City. And I have worn many hats in my 10 plus years here at FIT. I actually began as the head of research and instructional services. And then, as it became really apparent that we needed somebody in emerging technologies, I was writing the position description and decided to apply for it.
Oh, wonderful.
And ended up going in a different direction that was very personally fulfilling and also an outgrowth of my previous work. And now my title is Instructional Design Librarian, and I think this really accurately portrays the kind of work that I do here on campus. So,
Let me just clarify. So you consider yourself an academic librarian. You work at a university.
yes.
And you also have a niche specialty. So in some ways, your library is a special library, I suppose, or not.
Yes, I would say it is definitely a special library, but there are some surprising facts about FIT that a lot of people don't know. So we are usually in the top 5 or top 10 internationally for fashion institutions of higher education. We are, however, a State University of New York school. We are technically classified as a community college.
Oh, okay.
But we offer a BA and we also have a School of Graduate Studies.
Hmm.
So as an academic college, we're a little strange. We don't, there's, it's a state school. It's very accessible. We have a very diverse student background. We get a lot of students from the New York area, but we also have a lot of foreign students, and we're a top-ranking school internationally in the field of fashion. Another thing that a lot of people don't know about FIT is that about half of our students are in the School of Business and Technology. And this could be for fashion business management, but it could also be for textile science or production management or other niche fields. The other half of our students roughly are in the design school, art and design, with the majority of those students being in fashion design, but we also support communication design, interior design, toy design, and a whole slew of other design fields. And we're in the heart of New York City in the Old Garment District. So we get a lot of outside researchers. We see about 3,000 researchers from industry every year coming to use our collection. And that's something that makes us quite proud because we're not the only fashion school in the New York City area with a high reputation, but our library is the place that people choose to do their research. And that's significant.
Why is that?
Yeah, so that is a point of pride for me.
So Helen, why is your library so special?
Well, I think our library is special in a way. I think we were uniquely positioned to collect in depth in both fashion design and the fashion and related garment industries. Whereas a lot of other fashion degree programs are associated with art schools. This is a different way of collecting. Or they're associated with larger institutions like the New School or NYU. And so we have one library. We don't have a large library system. So we have one library that we have access to. State University of New York, we're one of the only schools in Manhattan that's part of SUNY. So it's not as if our students can go very easily to another SUNY library. So we have to serve all of their needs. As a result, we are a library of record in the field of fashion. Mm-hmm. And that's why people come to use us. Our most heavily used collection by outside researchers would probably be our periodicals collection, because we collect in niche areas relating to design, and we also collect internationally. And we hold on to our periodicals in paper form,
So collection
as
is
much as we can.
largely physical?
Largely physical.
Uh-huh. Great.
And this is really, really different from a lot of other schools. And it has
In
everything
many
to do.
universities, they're getting rid of back issues.
Whereas we are scrambling to find more room to store our back issues, because they are visual resources, and the way that they are used by design researchers is completely different from people who are doing text-based research. So does that sort of explain the
Yeah,
way?
I remember I had conversations with some folks at New York Public and also Culinary Institute, and talking about menu collections and the design of those, and those are kept in physical form as well.
Right.
For good reason.
Now those can also be digitized quite readily because of the lack of copyright restriction for some of them are orphaned materials. Some of them have been donated. But magazines, on the other hand, there still is a Condé Nast, and right, exactly. There still is a Hearst, and digitizing other people's materials is not our purview. And now, of course, ProQuest has digitized Harper's Bazaar and Vogue, American Vogue. Italian Vogue has been archived digitally. So there are online options, but I want to describe a scene for you. You go down to periodicals we have 3 floors here, and periodicals has its own floor. On the 4th floor, actually they share it, I apologize, they share it with special collections and archives. So that's also one of the gems of our collections, is our special collection. But walking into that room, it's not uncommon to see a researcher with several bound periodicals from a certain time period or a certain location out on the table, and they're standing there, they're taking photographs, right? So they're using their camera to photograph images. They want to see the juxtaposition of things. They want the big picture. They may just be flipping through page after page after page for close inspection of something. So if you wanted to say, I want my look to say 90s London, right? But not just any 90s London, hip London in the 90s, right? We have the magazine for that.
That makes complete sense. So
right.
And almost, when you find these things in a database, it's almost like it's in a decanter rather than its own wine bottle, and the context is lost.
And sure, it's also the big names that get digitized. So it's, American Vogue, great, fabulous resource, amazing resource. But it's not
that specific London
it's
small
not
paper.
It's not the face.
Yeah.
Right? Or it's not ID. It's not, these magazines that represent certain design and culture movements of a certain time and place. And that's what a lot of people
you really do perform a critical purpose for this world.
I guess so.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Now, it was a bit of an adjustment for me when I came here. I think I was hired at FIT because I had a business background from Pace University, and because I had worked in an art library. I had worked in various museum libraries, and so they did want somebody who was familiar with the art world. But art research is quite different, and business research, however, is definitely another thing we do a lot of at FIT, especially marketing.
Trends as well, I suspect.
Trends as well. So can I share my screen at this point?
Please.
Okay, so I've been talking a lot about sort of how designers research. I do want to talk about our students as well, and resources that are available. But one thing I wanted to share is an article that I wrote Oh, it's the history of, how things happen. I read it for a blog that was then taken down, so I had to move the article onto my LinkedIn page. And it is, if you want to, friend me on LinkedIn, that's fine.
Love to.
So it's called Design and Visual Research, and I'm revisiting it now because I'm not sure that I agree with everything that I wrote at the time that I wrote this article, but what I was examining were the visual literacy standards that had come out from the ACRL in 2011, and I was trying to see if they really made sense for the design researcher. And it occurred to me that a lot of designers are doing research that's more akin to how scientists do research. They're observing things. They're noting, they're taking notes, they're collecting samples, they're categorizing things, they're trying to recognize patterns, they're experimenting with materials. So it's a lot more like primary research, right?
Yeah.
And it is different, of course, as I mentioned in this article. There's no codified method. There is a scientific method. But here, for instance, is an image from a scrapbook of the photographer Cecil Beaton. And he, this is, we see images of Mae West. He didn't take any pictures of Mae West. He was trying to get at a feeling about masculinity and femininity, right? Here, clearly, this is a mood board. And fashion designers also use mood boards. They're working with iconography and they're collecting information that's out there. It might be somebody else's creation, but they're using it for their inspiration. And this is really, really typical to a design approach for doing research, for thinking about what your next project is going to be about. So it's a completely different usage of the visual than you would find from somebody who's an art historian or a costume historian, for that matter.
But it's interesting because it's referential, and in some ways it feels like a translation of a lit review with imagery.
Right, it is referring. It is, it's giving credit to other, but it's not really in a formal way, right? It's
right, exactly.
But you could see this as a bibliography, or a lit review. But this is a practice that I think emerged very organically over time, and artists have done everything from sketchbooks to scrapbooks to mood boards, and it is very primary. It's directly responding to the visual material, observing it, juxtapose and experiment with imagery. So this is one type of research, just one type of research that we try to help people with at the library. So I can also maybe talk about some tools that we use to do that.
That'd be great.
Okay, great. So designers and also people in fashion industry sometimes can't do all of this by themselves, right? So they need other people to be observing trends, for instance, for them, or recording visual data for them, especially in a very fast-paced industry. So it's one thing to be the artist and the designer and have this kind of inspiration. It's another to say, I have to come up with a line of clothing for the Gap for next season. What is it going to look like and what's going to sell? They both sort of require the same visual data, but they need to lean a little bit on people who specialize in that. And that's where trend forecasting services come into play. And I think when I first started at FIT, this was the first time I had ever encountered trend forecasting services. Now, they're more common at larger universities and colleges than they used to be because people in advertising and marketing started to see how useful they were in their professions as well. But a few.
I just want to give you some context. My first library job was at the newspaper advertising bureau in the library, and I would do that work with yellow paper, and I'd go through Ad Age, and I had a clipping file, and that was our trend forecasting service. And
wow.
We've come a long way.
Yes, we have. We have, and I think for fashion, the trend forecasting services can kind of be traced back to there used to be this profession of selling ribbons to ladies. No, seriously. And so you would observe what colors were popular in Paris fashions or what have you, and then sell them to people and say, oh, update your gown. These are the latest colors for spring. A lot of it began with color. Mm-hmm. Color forecasting was sort of the first thing, and it was often just buy this little extra thing to make your
so we have the Pantone color of the year now,
right? That kind of thing. And the very first American trend forecasting company was the Color Association of the United States, which started up during World War I when they no longer had direct access to European fashion information, as well as I think German dyers, fabric, textile dyeing. So that's a little aside. So should I show what some of these forecasting services are? So our LibGuides, if I share that, is right here. So these are our LibGuides, and this would be, obviously this is not a direct access to our databases, but if you want to see what we subscribe to in the way of forecasting services, you can definitely find that information here.
And students, I hope you dig into all of these categories. There's so much good stuff here.
Absolutely. So you'll find our fashion forecasting services listed under fashion and accessory design as well as fashion industry, because they're used heavily by both groups. And then we also have our historical collection of forecasts listed here in FIT library collections. So I'm actually going to use this link because I think it's important for you to get a sense of what we've collected over the years. So our forecast collection is rather large, and it is actually more of a finding aid because this will list everything we've ever had over time, going back to the late 19th century, including those ribbon salesmen's books. So this is our access to our historical collection. And if you come to fashion industry, however, you'll see that we have our forecasting fashion and trends LibGuide. To distinguish it from this one is about, and there's Pantone color of the year. Yeah. And this one is more about, it's about trend forecasting, but it also provides you access directly to the online forecasts that we have. So to find those online forecasts, which you won't really be able to access, of course, go to Trend Services. And so we have a number of trend services online, and then we also collect trend services in print. And what's listed here would be the current ones, not the historical. The print volumes, I wish I could show you because they come with swatches of fabric. They're often large. They're meant to be hung on a wall for somebody who's doing design research and product development. You might have a wall of Post-its and images, and you can hang these too. So the physical format is still, once again, just like as with the magazines, really important. The online is much faster and easier to use, and I'm going to take you into Worth Global Style Network Fashion. This is one of our students' favorites.
As you're doing this, it's just, I want to point to the idea that LibGuides are so important because users will not find these very special services on their own. And as we looked at discovery services, and you're going to be seeing some of these tools, the features and the interfaces would be completely lost in discovery.
Yes.
Just wanted to emphasize that.
When we have these listed in our database listing, it's sort of gives people information about how to access and in general what it's for. The LibGuide allows us to show all of the features that are available. WGSN is used in industry, and it comes with tools that allow you to create a mood board, to create color palettes. So it comes with a lot of high-tech features, as well as the trend forecasts.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then it saves the content that you or curate.
Yeah, but it's a lot to learn how to use all of these services. So the trend forecast database that we were just on has, has tutorials, has links to more information, so that people are really using the full package. But just to show you basically how this works, you would go to sort of your product categories, such as women, men, youth, etc., and they are already predicting trends for autumn-winter 2021. That's their most advanced notice. So we can click on a season. And what we get are a lot of what they would call sort of narratives or stories. And you can see there are these names that they've come up with: new mythologies, conscious clarity, phantasmagora. So these are 3 stories that we see, and we'll see them repeated throughout. So here's the story for accessories and the story for intimate apparel and so forth. And as we scroll down to lower on the list, we start to see the initial stories that came out that are sort of more macro in nature. And as you get closer and closer to the season, they've refined their focus and confirmed what they're looking for, confirmation that this is indeed a trend to track, to look at. And on occasion, they will drop a story. And they will say, okay, we're on the wrong track, we're changing track here. So let's take a look at new mythologies, for instance, in WGSN.
So what we're seeing is analysis and insight based on a variety of news feeds that these people are scanning.
Right, so they're following the arts, they're following what's happening culturally in general. They're looking at clothing on the street. They're tracking demographics, and of course, they're looking at the runway. So they might be looking at what's happening this season, and they might say, yeah, that's one that's going to grow. Whatever the color is, whatever the trend is, and they identify directions that they think things are going to keep heading based on what they're seeing now. And they're also giving language to the visual researcher. So this video is not going to be allowed to be played right now. But words to give to the researcher so that when you use search, which is overwhelmingly text-based, how to get at the right imagery.
Oh, great.
Because somebody who's using this might be a designer, but is probably a little bit more likely to be designing for a retail chain, or be the buyer for a retail chain who wants to say, aha, that's my consumer. That's my person. I recognize this person, their values, what gives them pleasure, what their ideals are, how they like to express themselves. So this is a fuse of traditional heritage and modern urban style. It has some vintage thrives, it says. As vintage thrives, it says, sorry, we have an opportunity to tell new narratives. So that's that whole thing of like reconstructing from the old and referencing the old and making it new again, that we see a lot in fashion. And they sort of have a color palette picked out. You can see all of this is downloadable. So this is not just information, but it's information that you can use to build for more information.
I can see how
and they're sort of giving confirmation of where they've seen this crop up already, and how the color plays out in pattern. And there are sub-stories. So we have New 70s, we have New Raphaelite, we have Globetrotter, Nordic Nomad, and so forth. And this story is very interesting to me because right now people really do need to be aware of cultural appropriation. But we do see it as an issue that is important to many people in the design world. So you really have to be really aware of what you're using and where it comes from. And WGSN can also help you with
Wow.
that, because they always source where they're getting their inspiration from. You can learn more about it. And other things.
I really want these things.
Aren't these gorgeous?
Yes.
They're really gorgeous. And they always give links to where they're getting, so they source. They do a very good job of sourcing.
So
Right?
Helen, when you were a baby librarian,
Yes.
and you just got to FIT, were you aware of the these great tools for this purpose or that, or did you learn that on the job?
I learned about forecasts here because, as I said, I think when they've become more common on college campuses that don't have fashion design degrees. But when I started 10 years ago here, I had never heard of them, ever. You can kind of think of them as a type of visual market research.
There are some free services, but they're nothing like this. They don't have.
No, they are nothing like this. But I do highlight some of the free services in an article that I wrote last year for College and Research Library News. That was one of the. It was. I can show it if you want.
And I will put a list of your sources.
Okay, yeah, maybe that would be best for now. But
I am interested in your motivation to contribute to the association's newsletter and all of that stuff. So you really are making a professional contribution with these LibGuides. I'm not sure if you're creating the tutorials or you're using the tutorials that are created for the products. But also your contribution, the LibGuides, the newsletters, blog posts you've done. You're exhibiting leadership in these ways for your community.
I think a lot of it comes from recognizing a need when I'm working with a student or an outside researcher. Students no longer have access to some of these tools when they graduate.
I'm very aware of that.
Yeah, and it is when I was working at Pace University, I never had anybody say, "Oh, I won't have access to Academic Search Complete again," even though I think it's a wonderful resource.
Yeah.
But the students here are crestfallen that they don't have access to our online,
and the businesses they work with are not likely to subscribe to these things.
Well, it depends on who they work for and in what capacity.
Yeah.
Right. So if they're working in a large retail chain, they might have access to one of these. They most certainly are not going to have access to 12 of them.
Yeah, the privilege that you have as a university student, specifically at one of these special universities, is really often unrecognized until you don't have that privilege anymore.
Yeah, and I have to say, the outside researchers don't have access to this either. They don't have access to our online trend forecasts or our print forecasts, because that's the agreement made with companies like WGSN. They don't want the whole of New York City using their specialized tools for free.
Well, and it's important to notice that is also the case across industries. So there are doctors who don't have access to important medical databases, and there are attorneys who don't have access to Westlaw and LexisNexis. And
it's the, as someone who wants to be a champion of everything open, it's the harsh reality that a lot of these tools are created for industry, and their business is
intelligence, corporate intelligence.
It's corporate intelligence. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And so it's just, it is what it is. But the fact that people do continue to come back, that so many people do use our library for research when they don't have access to these tools, does say something about the rest of our print collection. And I would have to say that what they're doing mostly is what I would term inspirational research. Our outside researchers are doing inspirational research, using our magazines and using our books.
So in terms of digital things that my students may be able to take a peek at, what are the things that you're fondest of? That
Oh gosh,
or
there's
that
so many.
I know it's like choosing your favorite child, but but are there LibGuides that that students couldn't live without? I know the Trends one is one of your favorites.
Well, the trends one is one of our favorites here at FIT. I will refer to the ACRL article that I wrote, which I can show now, but I want to show there are some free services out there for fashion.
Okay.
And one of my favorites is, I'm going to share screen again. You know, all of a sudden I find myself a little worried about sharing that WGSN when I gave that talk about corporate intelligence. I'm sure we're okay though.
I think so, this fits into fair use. You're not, there's no access to this.
There's no access to it.
And we're merely referring to it in
referring
terms
to
of
it, yes, exactly.
review or education. So my students have studied what fair use is, and I think we're quite all right here.
I'm sure, but you know, like,
I think a consciousness of that is important, and I'm glad you brought it up because the way we're thinking about it is almost intuitive. Because we've played with this stuff and we've created media before ourselves. So I'm very conscious, and I am certain, based on what I've learned, this is fair use. Okay.
So I'm going to share with you now. This is a free website. Are you looking at Tagwalk right now?
I think I'm in love with it. Yes.
Yes, you're instantly in love. This is free. This is free. They don't try to make future projections. But if you are sort of wanting to take into account and make collections of trends and ideas that you think are going to have lasting power, this is a great site.
So drop your Pinterest fashion boards. Go ahead.
Exactly. Drop the Pinterest fashion board, come right over here. What you can do, once again, women's wear, men's wear, and so forth, even models, streetwear. So you can select a season and a city, and it will show you images from the runway. You can also search using their own tags. You know, this is their own taxonomy of terms. That takes a little guesswork. Are they calling it a clutch? Are they calling it a handbag? But
so Helen, just to clarify, because this is an LIS course, are we looking at folksonomies or a controlled vocabulary?
Slightly, a slightly controlled vocabulary. Well,
a little bit of both, perhaps?
A little bit of both. I don't think this was designed by a librarian. Okay. What I'm saying is it's not keyword
But it has, yeah. Nevertheless, it is, yeah. But there's an expertise in the development of this vocabulary. The person knew what stuff was going to be needed to categorize.
Right. So, you know, I should be able to type in handbag, however, and find something. So, and you can see that no results over here. No results.
Right. So, when you do clutch instead, or purse, or or backpack.
Clutch.
Yeah.
So it's a little, so I think what it's based on is if you see something and it's described like this bag here.
If you open one of those images, would you see the metadata?
It once again, it really depends. This is giving the modeling agents, and it's giving that it's a Chanel Look 3. I
see the indexing though.
Yeah, you're not really seeing. So it is not, that's where WGSN really also, or one of the other ones like Fashion
Snooze. See the free lunch issue here.
Or Peclairs. This is the free lunch issue, exactly. But what's really great about it is if you log in, if you create a free account, you can also take advantage of their tag trends. And this is where they have pulled out their own trends. They're the people who work for Tagwalk. They have done an accounting of what's been on the runway in various cities, and they've categorized it. To get to this tag trends, which would be the closest thing to forecasting that they have, you would have to log in. You have to have an account.
That's on the left. Those are my colors.
Yeah. It is really gorgeous stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Another one that I think is fabulous, although they've recently completely changed their interface, so bear with me, is Now Fashion. Now Fashion it does live streaming of the shows during the season. It's become more of a magazine. It used to have a little bit more in common with Tag Walk. They both came about at around the same time. But here you can build your own boards, your own mood boards here. You can also view the collections. They have great articles. And what I like about the way they display the collections is that they have, if you look over here, they have all of the looks and they have the close-ups, right? And then sometimes they also, depending on the show, will have what they call the vibes. And the vibes would be, let me see if I can find that. Not finding it there. Vibes would be the behind the scene photos.
Oh,
there we go.
I love that navy blue. Okay.
Right, sort of like how, like in other words, not very many behind the scene here, but how the layout was, how close the audience was.
Yes, oh, it's not a panoramic. You're just seeing a carousel.
You're seeing, sometimes it's behind the scenes. That in this case, it just turns out to be sort of getting a sense of the feel. Gotcha. That was the stagecraft of the show, which is also really important to selling the collection.
So just to get behind this and backstage for you, the new fashion student, regardless of what area they're involved in at FIT, do they come into the university or the college knowing about any of these things?
Sometimes, yes. We have a high school in New York City that is just a few blocks from here that specializes in fashion.
So they're
yes, and those students often will take our summer live or Saturday live courses. It's a continuing eds program outreach to middle school and high school students. And many of them are in that particular high school. Some of them come just out of curiosity from other places. Those students get some exposure to the forecasting services, but most students are completely unfamiliar with forecasting. They're more familiar with their favorite blogger or their favorite Instagram account, and they don't necessarily, it depends on the student, they don't necessarily always understand the relationship between the blogger and industry. These days, there are very few bloggers who are not receiving merchandise to promote via their blogs.
Right.
So instead of really being trendsetters, they are representatives of the trend.
So how do you get the knowledge across to those students? Well, even the students at the high school may not understand the full scope of your resources. Everybody is discovering your LibGuides automatically, or do you have any way to embed yourself into courses? How does that look?
Oh, it does not look the way it does at a lot of other schools. We do not have a first-year experience, and we do not have a required library
orientation.
Well, not really. It is catch as catch can. What we do have is a lot of buy-in from the fashion business management side of the academic institution. Those students get to know our resources from day one. And it's the forecasts, it's the market research databases, it's the international trade information, it's how to source your garments. It's everything. It's design oriented. They need to be really culturally savvy, but they also need to understand how are consumers buying things. What is the impact of social media? So it's like an MBA meets fashion design meets advertising and marketing. It is a lot. So they get a lot of exposure to our resources. The fashion design students I think are some of the most talented students we have coming in. They pride themselves on their originality. They use our library. They're sort of stealth users, I'd have to say. They're in here for sure, okay? And they're often making things right in here. um, in the library, like literally using the library as a workshop space if they don't have another
Oh, I
space
love
to do
that.
something.
Yeah.
And that's true of all of our design students. They're very interested in the visuals, but getting them in for library instruction has been a little bit more difficult. I mean, I don't want to, we definitely see them. We see the fashion design classes come in, and interior design and communication design. We do see a number of them, but it's less of that because the teachers, the faculty have to teach a certain amount of, these are the tools and techniques. This is what you need to know how to do with your hands, with a machine, with software.
Yeah.
And it's so focused on the end product of creating something.
So there's a lot of laboratory work is what I
Yes.
Yeah.
And as I said from the beginning, a lot of design research is more like primary research.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So even if they're using a secondary source, they're more interested in the picture. Right.
All right. So I want to be respectful of your time, and
yeah.
I could talk.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've been blabbering.
No, I could talk about this all day long. But, okay. So what if I forced you to choose your 5 favorite research tools across the board? Okay. So you couldn't.
Okay. No, I'll do it. I'll do it.
All right. What are your go-tos or favorites?
Okay. This is going to be such a weird amalgam.
It's okay.
WGSN, which I just showed you.
Yeah.
Because it's good both for design and it's really great for market research as well. Because it's so much more than fashion. I didn't show you the half of it.
If you really have to show us, please do. I don't want to lose you.
Art Store.
Oh gosh, I love Art Store.
Art Store, because inspiration can come from anywhere. And so a student who wants to have, okay, one of my funniest design questions was like, I'm going for a look that's dirty disco.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, so dirty disco. There's no dirty disco section in the library. Okay, but we have not only the physical resources. So my third resource other than Art Store would be our books, our visual or highly, highly, highly visual books. I was able to answer that question by knowing who were the street photographers, what the major clubs were, where the section on 70s clothing was, late 70s clothing, and it was a synthesis of all that. And Art Store was also part of it, because you could get images of how people were dressed, right?
I remember those days.
And you could get it right there. Yeah. Yeah. High quality image, not somebody's Pinterest junk or reinterpretation of disco. Yeah. The thing.
And Art Store also has these cool viewing boxes and yes. a way to get to detail in a way you can't see in a tool that doesn't have the resolution right. or the zooming in tools.
Exactly. So Art Store, I would say WGSN Art Store, big visual books, big beautiful visual books. Okay. On any topic from microbes to clothing.
The studio
seriously. We have a book on pollen that's really beautiful. We do. Passport.
I don't know.
Passport Euromonitor, from Euromonitor. Passport GMID.
Okay.
For international trade and for a global view of what consumers are doing, buying, how they're living, how they're spending around the world. And so Passport Euromonitor, they keep changing their name. And Demographics Now.
Oh, okay.
That's a weird, that might seem like a weird one, but I work with the Design Entrepreneurs Program here. And a lot of them are designers with no business background, and they've set up shop online, and they have zip code information, and they're trying to figure out, is there a pattern to the person who's walking through my door or who's using my site online.
Makes sense.
Who are they? How much money do they have? What are their values? And demographics now has psychographic information on by zip code, and you can then map it.
Yeah, no, I've been seeing these heat charts. I think Reference USA and a couple of the others do those as well.
Right, and demographics now is what we can afford, and right now it's going out of my head. There's another really great one, Simple Map.
Okay.
Amazing, the same kind of thing. We didn't have the budget for it, but allows, it's great for someone who's visual, who's trying to get a handle on, these people are buying my things. Where do they live? What does this mean? Where are there other pockets of them? And what are the words that I could use to describe them? Because they have their own hunch.
Yeah.
When they go to the banks for a loan.
Hunches don't work.
Yeah, just don't work. Exactly.
All right, then I have one more question for you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, you're advising new professionals.
Uh-huh.
They may follow us into practice. They may invent new jobs. What is your best advice for a new librarian entering a world like yours? Or you can give us any information you want if that question doesn't work.
I would say any experience is good experience.
Mm-hmm.
I started in the public libraries, and I'm glad I started in the public libraries. That's number one. Number two, always remain curious, always explore, and find what you can do for other people within your institution, especially if you're at an academic library. You are just one little piece. Like at the public library, you are the center of the whole thing that you do, right? You may not be the center of the city budget, but you are the thing. At an academic institution, you have to find connections, and you have to make yourself invaluable to the needs of other departments with respect and with humility, but with confidence.
Because libraries are not always top of mind for everybody in this culture.
Right.
You've got to make the culture of the library important. And I think I tell my students that advocacy is solving other people's problems.
Yes.
And that's what I think it looks like outside of that kind of contained public library world.
Absolutely. And, just find joy in everything that you can, because it shows in your work when you're happy. So pursue joy.
Good advice.
So,
Helen,
yes.
Thank you so much. I think that I want to be you, and I have a feeling a few of my students will want to be you. And I hope you don't mind it if they reach out and contact you.
I really don't. You can find me on LinkedIn, Helen Lane, and I'm happy to connect with you there. Thank you so much.